I'm proud to say that I made this painting, and it wasn't through sheer talent or divine inspiration. It was made through intention. When you set out to make a painting, there's nothing more important, and I'd like to tell you how I did it. One of the hardest lessons I've ever had to learn as an artist was that the art that I wanted to make cannot and should not be rushed, especially for bigger paintings with more complex compositions. Personally, I've never done a painting quite this ambitious before, with full environments and a whole scene. This painting was born from the initial high I had when seeing the artwork in the Louvre for the first time. That initial inspiration soon faded once I actually started planning this painting. But if I'm being completely honest, that's 100% normal. Inspiration isn't a constant thing that just keeps going and going. It comes in waves. And when you actually start putting in the work and planning, the inspiration will find you again. Especially when you see things progressing more and more. Inspiration comes from consistent work, not the other way around. And I emphasize this because when I actually took the reference photo for this painting, I was on another planet, okay? I was like the happiest guy in the world. I wanted to draw everything and paint everything. I wanted to make these big, grand, epic, beautiful paintings. And I did come away from Paris with a few ideas. But from the time I got from Paris, which is back in November, and the time I actually finished this painting, it was a span of a few months. And I work on multiple paintings at once. So you really need to put in the work. That is the most important thing I can tell anybody. But anyway, as I just mentioned, I actually took the reference photo for this painting on the streets of Paris, somewhere around the Louvre. This is a very real cafe on a very real street corner. Now, a lot of people seem to have this concept in their heads when it comes to reference photos. Just because it's on the photo itself doesn't mean you paint it. Ultimately, you're the artist, and it's your job to plan the painting accordingly to your personal vision. A photo is merely a tool. It's definitely not a get out of jail free card. Taking a photo does not do all of the work for you. If you're copying everything you see in the photo just because it's in the photo, you're not really adding anything to the work that isn't already there. At that point, just show me the photo and move on. Now, with that being said, I just want to make it clear I'm not discounting the art of photography. I would never personally call myself a photographer just because I take pictures. My pictures are intended to support my paintings. In this particular craft, the pictures are not the art itself. They're just a tool for you to cherry pick information at your discretion in whatever way you think will ultimately serve your piece of art. I wanted this painting to feel almost the way I felt in that moment, like a dark, sort of romantic dream. When the viewer is looking at this painting, I hope it summons some sort of feeling in them too. This is why planning your piece is so important. Everything must be intentional. That's what separates a painter from an artist. So, how do you go about doing that exactly? First things first, let's look at the actual reference for this painting. This is the picture straight out of the camera, minus a few edits just to black out the faces for privacy. But beyond that, there's no edits, and it's full of a bunch of things that I feel don't really serve the overall story of the work. For example, the car in the lower left corner I knew was going bye-bye as soon as I looked at it, as well as that set of chairs. I've also omitted several other smaller details, like the interior of the storefront and the legible writing on most of the signs. When making these editing choices, it's important to remember that not all details are good or even really necessary. Some things are purposely less detailed, as not to take the attention away from the focus of the painting, which would be these two people having a conversation in this beautiful setting. The chalkboard and signs behind their heads don't deserve as much attention and detail as their facial expressions or their hands. This hierarchy of detail, when done correctly, creates a sense of depth and focus that the photo reference ultimately lacks. As mentioned previously, I wanted the main focus of this painting to be these two people in this environment. So with that in mind, I cropped the picture down to get rid of any excess detail that made it feel a little too busy. Once I got my composition right, it was time to start my study. So for pretty much any painting that I want to do that's a little bit more ambitious, a little bigger, I want to do a study, a small miniature version of that painting. Think of it as a practice run before your actual painting. The point in doing this exercise is so that you have most of the thinking already done by the time you move on to the final painting. You want to use the same colors, the same materials that you intend to use in the final. This way you know exactly what to expect and how to solve any bumps in the road before they actually become problems that can stop your work in its tracks. Now, this may seem counterintuitive. Why would I paint it once and just do it again? Why not just go right to the actual painting? But it saves you a lot of time, money, and wasted art supplies. Plus, you get the added bonus of gifting a cute miniature version of the painting to your friends or collectors who buy your work. But you definitely don't want to encounter problems on the final work and not know what to do about it, and then spend a whole bunch of time that you didn't really need to spend trying to fix a problem. It's a lot easier to be proactive than reactive. Success comes from being prepared. So let's look at the actual study I did in preparation for this painting. I cropped my reference in a 2:3 ratio. So my study had to be on a canvas space that pretty much conforms to that space as well as my final painting. My study was about 6 by 9 inches compared to my 20 by 30 final. When you choose to make a study, it's important to get things as close to the final as you can. This just ensures consistency throughout the entire process. Now, a study does not need to be extremely detailed, although the more detail helps, the better. It just needs to have enough information to convey what the physical finished product will look like and enough for you to pretty much determine if you're comfortable moving on to the final painting. When doing a study, you always want to prioritize composition, use of color, proportions, and value grouping. That's all much more important than detail. Once you have those things squared away, having the confidence to start the final painting is a piece of cake. And when you're comfortable enough to know that you want to move on to the final, you'll know exactly what colors you're going to use. You'll know exactly how those colors mix and interact with each other. And more importantly, you're going to get rid of any surprises that may or may not delay your process. On top of eliminating delays for your actual painting, it actually helps speed up the process as well. For example, I knew the background shouldn't have had much detail in it. I just wanted to keep it loose and abstract. I did all the heavy thinking as to how I would achieve that in my study. This way, when I got to the final, I accomplished my goals almost effortlessly. Everything you're seeing is in one layer. You don't want to overexert yourself on areas of the painting that don't deserve that much attention. Working this way is a much more efficient use of both paint and time. Before I started making this a regular practice of mine, I would waste so much time just trying to get an effect that I wanted, just to have something look a certain way. I was trying to do two things at once. I was trying to paint a picture, but I was also trying to figure out how I would paint a picture while painting the picture at the same time, if that makes any sense. If there's one thing you don't want to do while you're painting, it's fighting your paint for control. You are the painter. The paint does what you tell it to do, not the other way around. Experimenting on a study first is going to make such a difference in the way you know how your paint's going to behave and how your paint's going to react to everything. It adds such a level of confidence and control to your workflow that you'll actually start to improve faster. This is a really fantastic thing to do both as a beginner and a professional. And I really recommend every beginner to adopt this practice as soon as they can, really, just for building that confidence in your own skills. Confidence is one of the biggest factors to your own improvement. Remember, at the end of the day, it's just paint. Don't let a bunch of colored dirt intimidate you. You're capable of more than you think you are.